candidate David Kaptain and Incumbent Mayor Ed Schock. We're going to ask each of you an individual question. We're going to talk to Dave about the form of government that he supports, and then we'll ask Ed a question about the transparency issue that Dave has raised. Where do you stand on the form of government? What form of government do you believe is best for Elgin?
Sure, Mike. I originally started the conversation back last fall when I had talked to some residents from neighborhood associations, and they were starting to feel left out. And they asked about a ward system, and at that time Naperville was going through a referendum on a mixed ward system. And I really was not familiar with one, but I started to do a little research on one, and I said, well, I can ask if the council would be willing to look at an advisory referendum, ask the residents what they want. The time had come when we were going to have to add 2 more council members, and I thought it was appropriate that the discussion be started. Well, it didn't work with the council, so they suggested that we go out and get a petition to do that. We started work on the petition in early part of December. The deadline date was right around Christmas time, and we gathered 600 signatures in about a week and a half. So there was some interest in it, but we found out as we were going along, we're taking a lot of time trying to explain what our role, what government was like in Elgin. People wanted to know what the mayor was. Is this going to affect? Is this to change us to a full service mayor, full-time mayor, and drop the city manager? So we backed away. We thought we were going to run out of time anyway, to be honest, and we needed about 500 or 600 more signatures to make sure we would make it, and we didn't know if we could get done. So we thought, well, the best thing to do is go back, retrench, and let's have a community conversation. Well, the League of Women Voters, who did some of the work in Naperville, also said they'd stepped up and that met their requirements, that part of their mission is to explain government to the people, and that's what we did. We started on that process in January and started to hold some community meetings to talk about government, different forms of government. At the very first meeting in January, we invited Sean Stiegel, city manager, to come and talk about Elgin's government. At that point, he mentioned that other communities have commissioners, and they do a commission type of system. And he and I had a conversation back last summer. He remembered that one Carpentersville, Sleepy Hollow, for example, has city council members that are liaisons to different departments. So if people have a question, they can call that particular council person and get information. And I think to me, it kind of struck a chord. Well, it's a way to educate council members. Many of our council members have not been involved in the government to any great degree. It's an opportunity to do that, and it's something also to be explored. But personally, I live and have worked very well within the at-large system. It has its advantages, as does a mixed ward system from what I've seen. I personally have no preference. I can go either way, and one thing that I think that we have to stay with is the council manager form of government. I think that works best for our community. I do not believe a strong mayor is the way that we should move forward.
How do you feel about the ward system in which an alderman may only be responsible to a very small area of the city and may actually vote against things that would be for the betterment of the city but would affect his status in the ward?
You raised the greatest flaw in the ward system. I am definitely not in favor of a complete ward system for the city of Elgin. I saw some benefits in a mixed ward system such as Naperville put together, where the majority of people on the council are elected at large, and the minority come from a ward. And I think there's some advantages there. In Elgin, for example, we could have 5 at-large members, including the mayor, and 4 from wards. That way, if a person lives on the northwest side of Elgin, they could call their own alderman or councilman from their district, plus they would have 5 others that could work. And again, there are pluses and minuses to both sides. I think that many communities have found that it's been to their advantage to go to a mixed system, and I think that's something that we would benefit us to explore. And I think the community has to determine that. You know, it's their decision, and the council will. I hate to see it go to a point where we would have a binding referendum or something like that come out. I think it should be a community discussion. And like I said, other communities have explored this and moved forward. Elgin is one of the only ones now left in the state that has a complete at-large system.
One of the issues, of course, over the years has been the fact that people just don't vote. And no matter if you have a ward system or don't have a ward system, if people don't vote, it's not going to matter. And of course, areas like Providence that are new to the city, I can understand their alienation, but of course, if they had a candidate and they wanted to put that candidate up and support that candidate, rather than having a person just in their area, they would have an at-large councilman.
Right. Yes, and I agree. That would be that's an advantage for them. And I think bad candidates can get elected from any type of system, whether it's at large or if it's a ward system, and it's up to the voters to do that. Some of these, I think there may be more interest generated if a ward system were placed into, for example, the southeast side. They would have people that would represent their neighborhood, and maybe that would stir interest and get people more involved. I think one of the things that I see as a danger is that because of the cost of campaigns and financing campaigns, that we may be selecting against certain economic areas of the community. Not on a racial basis, but just on income basis. And it makes it difficult for them to run for an office. And I think a ward system may offer a benefit towards that. I think that, the trade-off of saying, well, if you vote for my proposal, if you get my streets fixed, I'll get your streets fixed. I think that's what happens typically in a system that's full wards, but it can't work when we have a mixed system because we have too many council members that are elected at large, and there's always that buffer.
All right, Ed, we're discussing transparency, and concerning transparency, Dave and I believe John Prigge raised at the council meeting in sort of an offhand way, without a direct accusation, but that things had been discussed and orchestrated before the meeting, and that this was essentially cut and dried. And one of the issues I think that most concerns voters is the transparency in city government, and not just at a local level, but at all levels of government. First of all, could you respond to that? What was done before the meeting? I mean, it's normal for council members to discuss things. It doesn't mean decisions are made, but they want to get the benefit of each other's knowledge. But what was done before the meeting? That's my first question.
In the meeting that you're referencing relative to the senior services agreement, the attempt to secure additional space for them and so on, nothing was done before the meeting. Not one phone call or conversation occurred prior to that meeting about the vote. I didn't know what the vote was going to be, and I asked Mike Warren if he knew what the vote was going to be, and he didn't. We came to that meeting. What had happened was, the sequence of events was this. Mike and I had received calls from the Senior Service Center saying, gee, the property next door is vacant. It would really serve our needs well. What do you think you guys can do? Mike went down and talked to them, came back to me and said, well, it turns out I think you know the landlord, and because he has other property in town and you've worked with him before, could you, see what we're talking about in rent and how we could get the best deal possible and stuff like that. And we did that, and then we went back down and met with Betty Schoenholtz from the Senior Services and talked about what would be a manageable rental amount and agreement and how they would use the space and so on. Immediately, within a couple days, this occurred like on a Monday, and I think we had a council meeting on Wednesday, Mike Warren brought the issue up at the Committee of the Whole, shared all the information with the rest of the council, said here's what we've got. We do have to move fairly quickly on this because there are other parties that may be interested in the space, and after all, the landlord is going to rent it to us at a loss, simply because he then avoids the prospect of having a building vacant for several months, and which would be a monetary loss. But that was all shared within a couple days with the council. It was shared immediately I came immediately back from that meeting and talked to the city manager and said, could we find $20,000, $30,000 a year for each of the next 3 years to take advantage of this unique opportunity? The staff worked on it then for about 4 weeks, came up with the idea, the staff came up with the idea that we should just amend the purchase of service agreement that we already have with Senior Services, since we already give them money. That was presented to all the council. We had the discussion. Kind of as a surprise to me, Councilman Prigge votes to table the issue, and the issue ends up passing on a 4-3 vote. I thought, frankly, it would be a slam dunk, that there wouldn't be any opposition, because other members of the council, including Dave, have been working on other options to try to secure space for the senior services, to which I have not been a party to any of those conversations or meetings, but that's fine, because every council person's out there trying to solve problems or take advantage of opportunities in the community. And Dave has shared with the rest of us that he was working on these things. So to me, this was making a mountain out of a molehill. There was nothing different that happened last Wednesday night that happens routinely and is done by all members of the council, which is you hear of a concern from constituents and you try to do something about it.
How many times over the years have you called Dave to ask him for his opinion, or have you included him in discussions?
I wouldn't know. I mean,
not the exact figure, but I mean, would it be regular?
Probably fewer than some other members of the council, clearly, but I will say this, I have called him more than he has called me. In fact, after receiving your question, I was searching my mind to see if I could think of a single time in which David initiated a call to me, and I couldn't. So the phone works both ways. And if someone, by not getting calls, you kind of get the impression that the person doesn't want to have those conversations with you. So I have called Dave fewer times than some other members of the council. But probably the person with whom I have conversation most is Bob Gilling, because we've served together for 18 years. But it varies from council member to council member.
Okay. And the last part of this question is, as mayor, you have at least the perception of a little more prominence than just a regular councilman, whether it's true or not true. And you can direct the staff to bring you or the council certain items, information. There can be the perception that by the information that you ask them to bring, that you favor a certain course of action over another. As mayor, how do you approach that? I mean, how do you make sure that the staff doesn't try to read into your request, oh, this is what the mayor wants to do?
Well, that's hard. I mean, for one thing, the mayor does have an office in City Hall, which naturally makes him or her more accessible to the staff, and the staff accessible to them than it does for an ordinary council person. I was a council person for 6 years. I know how this system works. But our city managers, every one that we've had since I've been on the council, has had a system whereby they meet with individual council persons on a regular basis, at least every couple of weeks, for several hours. Sometimes I would guess that in a course of a couple-week period, the city manager has spent more time meeting with council people than with me. So I think we enjoy equal access. I don't push the agenda, as you know, or people familiar with the council manager form of government know. Every council agenda is prepared by the city manager. If a council person any council person can request an item appear on the agenda. We all rely on the staff to do the research and the feasibility of any ideas, goofy ones included, that we might have. So we all have equal access. The budget process is very open. I mean, I think it varies more by personality than position. There are council persons who are much more involved, who are regularly meeting with staff, and our city manager has opened the department heads up to all of the council members, saying you can contact department heads anytime you want. So many city managers that I work with don't like that. They don't want us to talk to department heads. So the current city manager and the prior city manager both said, no, you can talk to department heads. I don't want you to go down to the guy on the street, but you're free to seek information or talk to department heads about ideas you might have. So I think basically it's a personal issue. How much does an individual council person want to be involved? And I would say it varies with each council person.